In the late 19th century, a battle unlike any other erupted across the dusty plains and rocky outcrops of the American West. But this wasn't a war over territory or politics, it was a war for bones. Two of the most prominent scientists of their time, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, became locked in a bitter rivalry that would change the face of paleontology forever. Their feud, known as the Bone Wars, wasn't just about science, it was about ego, fame, and a desperate race to uncover the prehistoric giants buried beneath the surface of America. For many, this saga is as dramatic and entertaining as any Western, filled with sabotage, stolen fossils, and scientific deceit. It's also a cautionary tale of how ambition can both drive discovery and distort truth. The story begins with two men from similar backgrounds but vastly different personalities. Marsh, a Yale professor with strong academic credentials, was methodical and cautious. Cope, a self-taught genius with Quaker roots, was impulsive and energetic. In the beginning, they were friends and collaborators. But a single mistake ignited the flames of resentment. Cope's reconstruction of the plesiosaur Allosaurus placed the head on the tail. Marsh publicly corrected him, humiliating Cope. That one correction turned admiration into animosity. From then on, both men dedicated their lives not just to discovering dinosaurs, but to outdoing each other. What followed was an arms race of fossil discovery, fueled by money, connections, and an insatiable hunger for recognition. They poured their personal fortunes into expeditions across the American frontier, especially the fossil-rich regions of Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. As the rivalry intensified, so did the tactics. Marsh and Cope bribed railway workers, cowboys, and even each other's employees for fossil leads. They sent out rival dig teams to the same sites, racing against time and one another. They used dynamite to quickly extract fossils before the other could steal them, often damaging or destroying the precious remains in the process. In one infamous incident, Marsh's team reportedly buried fossils just to prevent Cope's men from finding them. These were not the polite debates of academia. This was a scientific Wild West, in their desperate bid for glory. Both men sometimes published hastily drawn descriptions of fossils before proper analysis. This led to errors, misclassifications, and a host of confusion that would take decades for later scientists to untangle. Despite the chaos, the Bone Wars produced an explosion of paleontological discovery. Between them, Marsh and Cope identified and named over 30 new dinosaur species, some of which remain iconic today. Marsh's discoveries included the towering Diplodocus, the armored Stegosaurus, and the horned Triceratops. Cope, not to be outdone, unearthed the fierce Allosaurus and many other prehistoric reptiles. Their work filled museum halls and captivated the imagination of the public. Newspaper articles chronicled their finds with breathless excitement, painting them as heroic explorers uncovering Earth's lost past. For many Americans, it was their first exposure to dinosaurs and the concept that giant beasts once roamed their land. In this way, the rivalry played a pivotal role in popularizing paleontology in the United States. The term dinosaur became part of the cultural conversation, thanks in large part to these two men. But for all their discoveries, the Bone Wars left a complicated legacy. The rush to outpublish and outcompete led to sloppy science. Fossils were sometimes mislabeled or described multiple times under different names. In some cases, skeletons were reassembled incorrectly, creating misleading representations of prehistoric life. For example, Marsh's famous Brontosaurus turned out to be a composite of different species, a mistake that went uncorrected for decades. The damage wasn't just academic. Some fossil sites were permanently scarred by reckless digging. Valuable specimens were lost forever. The scientific community spent years cleaning up the mess. Later generations of paleontologists had to revisit and revise much of the Bone Wars-era research, disentangling fact from ego-driven fiction. Still, the impact of Marsh and Cope's rivalry cannot be overstated. They helped establish paleontology as a legitimate scientific discipline in America. Their work laid the foundation for major institutions, including the American Museum of Natural History and the Smithsonian. They inspired future generations of fossil hunters and researchers, and their story remains a gripping chapter in the history of science, a tale of brilliance marred by obsession. For older viewers who remember Ken Burns' documentaries or classic PBS specials, the Bone Wars evoke a bygone era of discovery when science was still wild and uncharted. It's a reminder that behind every museum skeleton lies a human story, not just of ancient beasts, but of the people who brought them back to light. The final years of Marsh and Cope's lives were marked by decline and bitterness. Cope, having spent his fortune and sold parts of his fossil collection, died in relative obscurity in 1897. Marsh, though better positioned, faced professional setbacks and lost much of his influence before his death in 1809. Neither man truly won the Bone Wars, but together they sparked what some call the golden age of dinosaur discovery. In a strange twist of fate, their mutual hatred led to mutual greatness. Without their feud, American paleontology might have remained a quiet, obscure pursuit. With it, the field exploded onto the global stage. Yet, the Bone Wars were not only shaped by the scientists themselves, but by the landscape and era in which they operated. The American West in the 1870s and 1880s was still largely uncharted, a rugged frontier teeming with both promise and peril. Marsh and Cope's expeditions often involved treacherous journeys by horseback, cart, and rail. Their teams camped in arid deserts, chiseled bones from sandstone under the scorching sun, and faced threats ranging from dust storms to hostile encounters. Working conditions were brutal. Many laborers hired for digs were local ranchers, miners, or out-of-work cowboys, paid little but exposed to danger and exhaustion. These unsung workers played a vital role in recovering the very fossils we now revere. Yet history often forgets their names. While Marsh and Cope were racing to outdo one another, the U.S. government was expanding westward. Their fossil hunts sometimes coincided with military surveys or Native American displacement. There are even accounts of Cope using military escorts to gain access to fossil-rich territories. The intersection of science and colonial expansion is an uncomfortable truth rarely discussed, but it highlights the complicated context in which these discoveries were made. To many watching from the East Coast, Marsh and Cope were pioneers of science. To those in the West, they were part of a larger force transforming the land. Not always for the better, the media played a major role in amplifying the drama. Newspapers of the day followed their feud like a tabloid saga. Journalists wrote vivid accounts of stolen bones, personal insults, and scientific retaliation. Some headlines were exaggerated, but others were based on letters and accusations the men hurled at each other through professional journals. At one point, Cope even accused Marsh of scientific fraud in a public forum. The rivalry became so notorious that it spilled beyond academia and into the public consciousness. Ordinary Americans, many with little interest in science, suddenly knew the names of these fossil hunters and followed their exploits as they would a political scandal. This was science as spectacle. But perhaps the most lasting impact of the Bone Wars wasn't the rivalry, it was the framework they left behind. Marsh and Cope helped establish protocols for fossil collection, documentation, and classification. Although they broke many of their own rules in their haste, their legacy forced the scientific community to take paleontology seriously. Museums began investing in dedicated paleontology departments. Universities developed curricula based on their findings. Even as their personal reputations dimmed, their discoveries endured, and decades later, Scientists would revisit their notes, drawings, and dig sites to correct errors and deepen understanding. One of the most fascinating aspects of this story is how the line between triumph and tragedy is so thin. Marsh and Cope could have been remembered as two of the greatest collaborators in the history of science. Their combined talents, Marsh's meticulous nature and Cope's intuitive genius, might have produced a legacy even more extraordinary. But pride got in the way. Their obsession with defeating each other cost them friendships, fortunes, and the chance to shape science together. There's a powerful lesson here for anyone who has ever felt ambition blur the boundaries of cooperation. Scientific progress thrives on curiosity and passion, but it withers under ego. Modern paleontologists look back at the Bone Wars with mixed feelings. On the one hand, they marvel at the sheer volume of fossils collected and the foundational knowledge laid during that era. On the other hand, they wince at the destruction caused by carelessness and the myths born from rushed conclusions. Entire generations of school children grew up with outdated images of dinosaurs because of errors made in this period. The Brontosaurus, for example, remained in textbooks and toy sets long after it was scientifically debunked, only to be partially resurrected in recent years due to new findings. That confusion is part of the Bone Wars' complex legacy. The drama even inspired pop culture. Novels, documentaries, and films have all drawn from the chaos of Marsh and Cope's feud. Some portray it as a thrilling race for knowledge, others as a cautionary tale of hubris. The Bone Wars have been referenced in everything from museum exhibits to comic books, often as a symbol of how intense scientific pursuit can become. And perhaps that's why the story continues to resonate. For older audiences, it evokes a time when America was still being mapped, when adventure and discovery felt like one and the same. It reminds them of childhood days spent fascinated by dinosaur books, model skeletons, and Sunday night PBS specials. In our current age of rapid technological advancement, the Bone Wars offer a strange comfort. They remind us that science has always been a deeply human endeavor, flawed, passionate, sometimes messy, but always striving toward truth. Marsh and Cope may not have played fair, but their determination opened doors for generations of scientists to come. They showed that even in rivalry, great things can be achieved. So next time you see a fossil in a glass case, think beyond the bones. Think of the dusty deserts, the midnight train rides, the scribbled field notes, and the stubborn men who risked everything to bring those ancient creatures back to life. The story of the Bone Wars isn't just about dinosaurs. It's about what it means to be human, ambitious, driven, and forever searching for something just beneath the surface. Even today, echoes of the Bone Wars can be felt in modern science. Competitive research grants, academic rivalries, and the rush to publish first can sometimes mirror the very same tensions Marsh and Cope embodied over a century ago. But there's now a greater emphasis on collaboration, peer review, and transparency systems designed to prevent the kind of chaos that plagued 9th century paleontology. The field has matured, but the lessons remain. Museums still display specimens first uncovered by Marsh and Cope's teams. School textbooks still trace the lineage of species they once misnamed. And in scientific debates today, their story is often cited as a reminder that discovery should serve truth, not pride. There's something deeply human about the Bone Wars. It wasn't just about fossils, it was about legacy, insecurity, and the need to be remembered. For an older generation of viewers, that struggle resonates. Many have lived through decades of cultural shifts, professional battles, or personal rivalries. The Bone Wars offer both a nostalgic return to the boldness of early science and a timeless reflection on what drives us forward, even if imperfectly. In the end, perhaps Marsh and Cope did more than unearth dinosaurs. They unearthed something about ourselves.